One day, alone the skies. Despite his passion, high school wasn't always kind to him. Jordan's intense focus often made him a target for ridicule. Some classmates mocked him for spending so much time studying instead of partying or hanging out. "You think you're going to run an airline one day?" One boy sneered during lunch. "Good luck with that." Jordan didn't respond. He'd learned that arguing wasn't worth it. Instead, he let their words fuel him. Every insult, every doubt, became another log added to the fire burning inside him. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his young life, a day where an 11-year-old boy would finally take to the skies and see the world from above. But in just moments, his joy turned to humiliation as he was dragged off a plane, singled out, and made to feel like he didn't belong. What happened next? Well, let's just say the skies would never be the same again. Before we dive into this powerful story of resilience and redemption, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And while you're here, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Stories that challenge, inspire, and keep you guessing right to the very end. Let's get started. It was supposed to be an ordinary trip, just an uneventful flight to visit family in a city far away. For 11-year-old Jordan Carter, though, it was anything but ordinary. The idea of flying had always captivated him, filling his young mind with dreams of freedom and adventure. As he clutched his mother's hand and boarded the plane, the rhythmic hum of the jet engines and the bustling energy of passengers settling into their seats felt electric. Jordan's eyes roamed over every detail. The polished cabin lights, the bright red uniforms of the crew, the faint smell of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sterile scent of aircraft upholstery. Flying felt like magic to him, an escape from the mundane world, where the skies stretched endlessly above and below. In that moment, he imagined himself soaring, weightless, untethered from the ground. But magic has a cruel way of vanishing when the harsh realities of the world come crashing down. Seated in coach, Jordan and his mother stowed their carry-ons and buckled their seatbelts. His mother, Amelia, was a woman of quiet strength, her presence a constant source of comfort for Jordan. She leaned over, smoothing his collar and whispering something about behaving during the flight. Jordan nodded eagerly, his excitement too great to contain. Then, the first crack in their perfect moment appeared. A flight attendant emerged from the front of the cabin, her sharp gaze scanning the rows. Her movements were brisk, her expression a mixture of authority and impatience. Jordan noticed her before she noticed him, her presence making him instinctively sit a little straighter. She stopped abruptly beside their row, her eyes narrowing as they landed on him. "Young man," she said in a clipped, almost mechanical tone, "I'm going to need you to step off the plane." Jordan blinked, confused. "Me?" "Yes, you," she replied, her voice devoid of warmth. "You violated our policies about carry-on items." "What are you talking about?" Amelia interjected, her protective instincts kicking in. "He's done nothing wrong. Everything he has is in my bag." The flight attendant's lips tightened into a thin line, her demeanor growing colder. "Ma'am, we have rules. If you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to escort you both off this aircraft." Passengers in nearby rows paused their conversations, turning to watch. Jordan felt his cheeks burn under their gazes. His mother's voice grew louder, tinged with anger and disbelief. "This is ridiculous. He's just a child. What policy could he have possibly broken?" But the flight attendant was unmoved. Her voice grew sharper, as if rehearsed for moments like this. "I'm not going to argue, ma'am. This is your final warning." Jordan looked around the cabin, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw the faces of strangers, some curious, others indifferent. A few glanced at him with pity, but none of them spoke up. He wished someone would say something, do something, but the silence was deafening. Amelia stood her ground for a moment longer, her fists clenched at her sides. But Jordan could feel her trembling, her frustration barely contained. She grabbed their bags, her jaw tight with fury, and turned to Jordan. "Come on, baby," she said softly. Let's go. The walk down the narrow aisle felt endless. Jordan's head hung low, his gaze fixed on the patterned carpet beneath his sneakers. He could feel the stares of the passengers boring into his back, their whispers following him. A woman in the front row shook her head, muttering something Jordan couldn't make out. He felt like every step was carving something into his heart, a deep, invisible scar. When they reached the terminal, Amelia dropped their bags and turned to him, kneeling down so she could look him in the eyes. "Listen to me, Jordan," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "What happened back there wasn't right. Don't you ever think for one second that it was your fault, okay?" Jordan nodded numbly, but the words barely registered. His mind was replaying the scene in a loop. The flight attendant's cold eyes, the silence of the passengers, the heavy weight of humiliation pressing down on him. For the first time, flying didn't feel like magic anymore. It felt like a door slammed shut in his face. As they waited in the terminal for the next flight, Amelia made phone calls, her voice low but resolute as she lodged complaints against the airline. But Jordan remained quiet. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. Something inside him felt heavy, like a knot tightening in his chest. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred, a spark, faint but insistent. As he sat there, watching planes taxi along the runway, a thought began to form, solidifying with every passing moment. One day, he promised himself silently, this will never happen to me or anyone like me ever again. That day, something shifted in Jordan Carter. The boy who once saw flying as magic had found a new kind of power, a determination to rewrite the rules of the skies. For Jordan Carter, the years that followed the flight incident were anything but easy. The memory of that day clung to him, like a shadow that wouldn't fade. It wasn't just the humiliation he endured, but the crushing realization of how powerless he had felt. Yet, within that helplessness, a spark had ignited, a quiet but relentless determination to rise above what had happened. In high school, Jordan channeled his emotions into his studies. He became laser-focused, throwing himself into math, science, and business classes with a dedication that astonished his teachers. Every grade he earned, every problem he solved, felt like a small victory against the injustice he had experienced. But it wasn't just about excelling academically. It was about proving to himself and the world that he was capable of more. At home, he devoured books about aviation and entrepreneurship. While other kids his age were glued to video games or social media, Jordan spent his nights studying airline operations, aircraft mechanics, and business strategy. He read biographies of aviation pioneers, imagining himself walking in their footsteps. Sometimes, he'd sit by his bedroom window, watching planes glide silently through the sky, and wonder what it would feel like to truly be in control of one. Late at night, when the house was quiet, Jordan would pull out his sketch pad and draw. His sketches weren't of planes, but of entire airlines. He meticulously designed logos, uniforms, seating layouts, and even customer service policies. "No passenger will ever feel the way I did," he'd whisper to himself as he shaded in another concept. Despite his passion, high school wasn't always kind to him. Jordan's intense focus often made him a target for ridicule. Some classmates mocked him for spending so much time studying instead of partying or hanging out. "You think you're going to run an airline one day?" one boy sneered during lunch. "Good luck with that." Jordan didn't respond. He'd learned that arguing wasn't worth it. Instead, he let their words fuel him. Every insult, every doubt, became another log added to the fire burning inside him. By the time Jordan reached his senior year, his dedication was beginning to pay off. His grades were near perfect, and his teachers often remarked on his exceptional maturity. One teacher, Mrs. Delgado, pulled him aside after class one day. "Jordan," she said, handing him a letter, "this came for you." He took the envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he read the return address. Scholarship Committee for Aviation Excellence. He had applied months ago, pouring his heart into an essay about his dream of transforming the airline industry. "Open it," Mrs. Delgado urged, her eyes twinkling with pride. Jordan tore the envelope carefully and read the words that would change his life. Congratulations! You have been awarded a full scholarship to pursue your degree in business and aviation. When he told his mother, Amelia, her reaction was immediate, tears of pride streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. I always knew you'd do great things, she said, her voice thick with emotion. University life was a whirlwind. For the first time, Jordan was surrounded by people who shared his passion for aviation. He threw himself into his courses, studying everything from airline economics to marketing strategies. He also worked part-time jobs to cover additional expenses, spending weekends as a ticketing agent at a small regional airport. The job gave him a front-row seat to the industry he hoped to one day transform. But not everything came easily. The competitive nature of his field often left him feeling isolated. Many of his peers came from privileged backgrounds, with parents who were CEOs, pilots, or industry veterans. Jordan, on the other hand, had no connections, no safety net. It was just him, his drive, and the promise he had made to himself all those years ago. One evening, while researching airline histories for a class project, Jordan stumbled upon an article about the airline that had wronged him as a child. The headline read, "Legacy Airline Faces Financial Turmoil Amid Management Struggles." His heart raced as he read the article. The once dominant carrier was now teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, its reputation tarnished by years of mismanagement and poor customer service. The irony wasn't lost on Jordan. The same airline that had humiliated him was now struggling to stay afloat. He leaned back in his chair, the spark inside him growing into a flame. For the first time, the dream that had once seemed impossible felt tangible. He didn't just want to be part of the aviation world. He wanted to change it. And now, he saw a path to do just that. From that moment, Jordan's focus became sharper than ever. He began drafting a business plan, sketching out ideas for an airline that would prioritize inclusivity, innovation, and customer experience. He envisioned a fleet of planes where every passenger, regardless of background, would feel respected and valued. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. Transforming a dream into reality would require more than just passion. It would require resilience, resourcefulness, and an unshakable belief in his vision. As Jordan stared out the window of his dorm that night, watching the lights of a plane blink in the distance, he whispered to himself, "One day, I'll own the skies." Dreams, Jordan Carter quickly learned, come with a price. The aviation industry was no playground for a young, unconnected entrepreneur. It was a fortress, its gates guarded by wealth, legacy, and power. The closer he got to his goal, the clearer it became that breaking into this world would take more than hard work. It would take grit, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief in himself. Fresh out of university, Jordan threw himself into the world of aviation with everything he had. He took a job as a junior analyst at a regional airline, earning barely enough to cover his expenses while immersing himself in the intricate web of operations, finance, and logistics. Every day was a lesson. He studied flight schedules, cost structures, and customer feedback. He observed how decisions were made, and how many of those decisions excluded voices like his own. At night, after long hours at work, he stayed up crafting his vision for the airline he dreamed of building. He called it Phoenix Air, a name that symbolized rebirth and rising from the ashes. His business plan grew thicker by the week, filled with meticulous details, budget projections, fleet strategies, and a customer service model that would redefine the industry. But turning his vision into reality was another story. When Jordan began pitching his idea to investors, he quickly encountered resistance. Meeting after meeting ended the same way, with polite smiles, firm handshakes, and a "we'll think about it" that never turned into action. Some investors didn't even bother hiding their skepticism. "You're ambitious. I'll give you that," one potential backer said, leaning back in his chair. "But this is aviation, son. It's not just about dreams. It's about capital, connections, and experience. And frankly, you Don't have enough of any of those. Jordan walked out of that meeting with clenched fists